Welcome to our world of fiery videos, covering topics of everyday importance to print providers. Today we will cover how to optimize detail in an image.
When we look at the detail in an image, we look at how sharp it looks and how natural it looks, and we have three things to contend with. The first is the original sharpness of the image. That is to say, did we have the picture in focus when we took the picture? The second challenge is that when we print an image, we halftone it, right? We convert a continuous tone original into little halftone dots for the printing press. Those halftone dots, by definition, are not touching each other in most tonal ranges. That means we're sacrificing some level of detail in the halftoning process. In order to get detail to render properly on a digital print, or even conventional any print, I need two things besides a focused photograph to start with. I need to have enough resolution in the image to fill the area that I'm trying to print with it, and I probably need to apply some digital sharpening, what we call Unsharp masking. When we talk about resolution, or what I have always called enough data to go the distance, we think about images in terms of pixels per inch. Pixels per centimeter is fine too. What I don't want you to say is DPI, or dots per inch, because DPI is very confusing. My printer has a certain DPI, my monitor has a certain DPI, right? The way to think about how this image is going to print is to think about how many pixels I got from the camera or scanner and how big I'm trying to print those pixels. So let's do a simple calculation. Let's say I have an image on my page that's 2 by 3 inches at 300 pixels per inch. I want you to ask yourself, how many pixels are there in each dimension of this image? In the 3-inch dimension, if I have 300 pixels for each of those inches, I'm going to have 900 pixels. In the 2-inch dimension, at 300 ppi, I'm going to have 600 pixels. Great. So if I have an image that's 900 by 600 pixels, and I want to print it 2 by 3 by 2 inches on my page, it's going to have excellent detail. Like that. Here's what happens. The designer, or somebody somewhere in the production process, gets this file, and somebody says, oh no, we need to fill up something on that page. Take this other object out and make that picture bigger. They don't go back to the original photograph to resample it in a different way in Photoshop. They may not even have it. Instead, they stretch it out in the design application. Let's say we stretch that out to 9 by 6 inches. What's my new pixels per inch? Well, let's remember, in the 9-inch dimension, that used to be 3 inches with 300 pixels in each inch, so I had 900 pixels. If I take 900 pixels over 9 inches, I'm down to 100 pixels per inch. Same way with this other axis. What happens when I go below a certain threshold PPI is I get pixelation. Pixelation is where the halftoning process reverses itself and the pixels show. Rather than the halftone dots showing me the detail in the image, the halftone dots show me the pixels. Okay? A good rule of thumb for best practice is that you should always have 300 pixels per inch. In reality, you can get away with as little as 150 or 200 pixels per inch if you must, but you're not going to get the same kind of sharpness and quality that you will at 300. Before I go on, I want to say one other comment here. People get very confused around this topic because they'll come to you and they'll say, well, you have a 600 DPI press there. That digital press is 600 DPI, or your inkjet or whatever it may be. You're going to print a 300 PPI image on there and expect it to work? Absolutely. We're going to halftone it. We're going to use the high resolution of that printer to form the halftone dots, not to render every single pixel of the picture. We can't do that, right? We need to halftone in order to print. One way I can solve a pixelation problem on a digital front end is to use a feature like image smoothing. So on the Fiery DFE, we have a feature called smoothing. Smoothing resamples the data for you because you don't have access to the original file maybe to go get more pixels. You're not going to get the same level of image sharpness, but it will eliminate pixelation. So I see this here. I can enable image smoothing in the job properties. And I can take an image that looked like this, and I've zoomed in quite a bit for you to see it, and convert this image so that it looks like this. Still doesn't look great. It's not sharp, but it's no longer pixelated. And if it's a small object in a picture, such as this is, it's probably not going to bother the print buyer as much as pixelation. The other thing we do to give better detail when we print is we apply Unsharp masking. Unsharp masking sharpens the edges of images, and it is a technique that came from camera back separation years and years ago. So just to give you a moment of history here, Unsharp masking is called this because when we made camera back separations, we would basically shoot 4 halftones of the color original. We'd shoot a picture or a halftone with a red filter. That would make the cyan film. Then a green filter for magenta, a blue filter for yellow, and we'd use a special filter for black, the neutral density. Finally, we'd take a 5th exposure. We'd make a 5th halftone film, and that film would be out of focus. That was called the Unsharp mask. If you think about a blurry photograph, if I had a blurry photograph in front of you and I cut a hole in a paper napkin so that you can only see one little circle on that photograph at a time, if I showed you a smooth area of the photo, you wouldn't be able to detect the blur. But if I move that hole in the napkin over an edge in the photo, might be the edge of an object or a person's hair or something with contrast against the background, there you see the blur. So the Unsharp mask basically photographically identified the edges. And when we made contacts of those halftone films, we'd use the Unsharp mask to give us extra dot growth and extra hardness of those dots at the edges to enhance contrast of those edges and what appears to be detail. Today we do this digitally. We apply what's called a black line and a white line at the edges, which simply means if I have a boundary between a light and a dark object, I'm going to draw an extra light line of pixels on the light side of that boundary and an extra dark line of pixels on the dark side of that boundary. I'm really not giving you more sharpness, but I'm enhancing the contrast of edges. Whenever we adjust Unsharp masking, we should remember to consider the final result. So if you're zoomed out, so that the thing is tiny on your screen in Photoshop or some other tool, you're going to probably adjust the sharpening wrong. If I want to see what's going to happen with sharpening, whether I'm in Photoshop or maybe a tool like our Image Enhanced Visual Editor on the Fiery, I need to make sure that I'm zoomed into 100%. Also consider your output size and screening. If I'm using a very coarse halftone screen, that is a low LPI screen, I might want a little more sharpening, or I might need a little more sharpening than if I'm using a higher LPI screen, like in the 100 to 200, 300 range. Remember too that the output size is going to matter. If I sharpen an image for a poster and then I print it as a postage stamp, the smaller reproduction is going to look too contrasty. The edge lines will be too big. So here's an example of digital Unsharp masking. I've just created a black and white sample here for you, a grayscale sample, that shows different levels of difference between the edges. And I've applied truly a massive amount of Unsharp masking so that you can see this on the WebEx. But what you see is that there is an extra dark and an extra light line drawn on each side of these borders, okay? And I have a control over the radius of that border. Usually I use just a couple of pixels. I made this extra wide so you can see it. And I'll go back and forth. We see that Unsharp masking gives greater edge enhancement where there is greater contrast and lesser edge enhancement where there's lesser contrast. So this helps us to keep the photograph looking natural. I just want to share with you a couple tools if you don't want to worry about all the things we just talked about. And these are tools for automatic image correction. So if you have a high volume workflow, you're not going to adjust every picture, right? If you have a workflow that has images which I politely say have varying degrees of quality, which means maybe some of these are snapshots somebody took at an office party that are going to be in some print you have to make, automatic image correction is an excellent way to go. We have the image enhance feature on the Fiery, again, something that I enable in the job properties. Image enhancement does a whole range of things, and I'm not going to show you the controls, but it can adjust the tonality, it can adjust color balance, it can adjust color saturation, and it can actually automatically fix things like red eyes that might be a problem in a photograph. We let you access this in a second way. The Image Boost preset, which you can download at this URL that I'm showing here, and which we'll share with you in the resources at the end, is a preset for the Fiery that automatically turns on both the image enhancement and also the image smoothing that we looked at earlier that helps you out if you have images of low resolution.
Thank you for watching. For additional resources and e-learning classes on this topic, visit our website. To see all recorded sessions and register for upcoming World of Fiery webinars, please visit efi.com/WOF webinars.